Good morning, everyone. This is Kristen Anderson, and thank you for joining us for our 5th episode of Steno Matters podcast. With us today are Dave Wenhold, our Executive Director and lobbyist for NCRA. Dave. And also we have Meredith Seymour, and she is the past president of Wisconsin and a reporter up in Wisconsin. And then we have Joshua Edwards, who is a past president of New York and the current NCRA chair. And for those of you who do not know what NCRA stands for, it's the National Congress of State Associations. And he is a captioner up in New York. So thank you all for joining me today. And what we're going to be talking about today is the importance of attending and using the tools of legislative boot camp. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave. Dave?
Thank you, Kristen. Good morning, everybody. If you've not attended an NCRA boot camp, you're truly missing out. And we've got a couple people here that have attended. This year's boot camp is going to be March 10th through the 12th. And of course, we have it in the Washington, D.C. area. Boot camp originally started probably about 25 years ago at NCRA. And the purpose was to train our state leaders and anybody who's interested in advocacy in the ways to effectively advocate for your profession. The government is doing something to you and for you every day, whether it's in your profession, your tax life, whatever it is. And most people don't have the tools available to really effectively advocate for themselves, whether it's at the national, state, or local level. What we do at boot camp is we give you those tools. We literally talk about grassroots lobbying. We talk about how to network. We talk about how to have a conversation with a legislator and understanding body language that basically tells them if they're interested in your issue or not. And that's a fun one. But all of this stuff comes into very important because when you're talking to a legislator has a very short period of attention span with people because they have so many meetings, especially at the state level when the legislative cycles tends to be condensed. What we do in DC is we'll take you through all of those seminars. We have 2 full days of seminars that teach you how to be an advocate. And then what's kind of fun is we have mock meetings that you go and meet with pretend legislators and pitch your issue. Past few years has been the Training for Real-Time Writers Act that we've lobbied on. So the attendees would learn about the issue, they'd learn how to effectively advocate, and then they'd go into these mock meetings and you'd have somebody who was a pro senator, you'd have somebody who's a negative senator, you'd have somebody who hates court reporters, you have somebody who loves court reporters and captionists, and then you have neutral people. And each message is a little bit different when you're talking to how to influence somebody who's pro versus con. You know, a pro you want to keep at yes, a con you want to get to maybe and get them off a no. So all of these little tips and tricks are important. And then after your meeting, we have this mock hearing, basically. So if you're going to testify in front of your state legislature or even a city council, how to do that. And we have a panel of mock legislators up there that they testify to. And you get feedback along the way. You did this great. You know, we took you down a rabbit hole here on purpose. A lot of those things happen and it makes you very effective. So when you go up on Capitol Hill on the last day, it's a cakewalk because you know everything. And it's interesting because I've had congressional offices reach out to us and said, you guys are the most trained and well-prepared organization that they see all the time. And NCRA has a very good reputation that our people are prepared. Sometimes you go to a Hill Day and people have a folder and here's your schedule with no training. And it's like, good luck. And that's not a real good way to make sure that your people are looked upon positively on Capitol Hill or at state capitol. So that's a little bit of an overview of what boot camp is. Some people find it intimidating because, quite frankly, it's out of their comfort zone. But that's the point. This is the point of growth. This is where you become more. Give you an example. We had one attendee, his name is Matthew. I'm not going to tell you his last name, but most of you would probably know him if you when we go down this rabbit hole. He was the former chair of NCRA. And when he came to boot camp, he was like, oh, I don't need this. I'm not interested in this. I don't like the government. And after 2 boot camps, he became a assistant mayor in his city. Another person became an alderman because they took that skill set and realized that they can make a difference, not only in the reporting and captioning professions, but they could also make a difference on things that are important to them. For example, this gentleman, Matthew, just moved to Florida into Fort Lauderdale Airport. If you look at all the art up there, he lobbied to get that up there. And he sent me a picture and said, this is a direct result of your boot camp training, Dave, which is great. That's awesome. So you can take this training and use it anywhere. And it's interesting because once you learn how to do this, it's kind of like you've looked behind the curtain during the Wizard of Oz and you've seen how things are done, and you realize you can make a difference. So it's great. I don't want to monopolize time, but I could go on for boot camp forever because it is my passion. I love doing it. I love training people. I've probably trained thousands of reporters and captioners in the past 20 years, and it is awesome. So I strongly suggest you if you get an opportunity to go. This year, we're going to be talking about AI and its impact in the legal and captioning communities. So it's a hot topic. We want to get ahead of it. NCRA is always trying to be on the cutting edge of what we're doing. Sometimes we don't always get there at the time frame that people want, but we get there, I promise. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Meredith, right?
Yep, go ahead, Meredith.
All right. Well, it's my turn. And so it's already been a year since I attended boot camp last year, and there's been many takeaways. And I will definitely bounce off of what Dave said when it comes to the role playing and the mock trial, or kind of the mock situation where we're in front of the panel. And that really helped us ingrain all the details that we were practicing beforehand. And so that we were able to kind of have our elevator pitch when we were on Capitol Hill, because it's kind of like taking a test. You kind of want to be over prepared. So then once you are in front of, the whoever you're going to be in front of on Capitol Hill, you're going to have all these numbers or names or scenarios that are right on the top of your head, and you're able to just kind of shoot them out and say them confidently. And that's the second word that I really is ingrained in my mind, is being confident. There was definitely this huge amount of confidence that was built afterwards, because I was one of those who, when I signed up for boot camp, I wasn't so sure about it. I was really worried about I was worried about politics. I was worried about government. I don't have that kind of a background. And so I didn't know what I needed to be prepared for on Capitol Hill. And so I definitely had that confidence to be able to speak to whoever I was going to be in front of. I didn't know if it was going to be a senator or if it was going to be somebody in their office, but I definitely was gained that confidence to speak in front of them, and then also in our own state. And that's going to be something that I'll be working on now that I'm past president, but we'll be encouraging future leaders that we can be able to speak to our senators in our own state and kind of have these elevator pitches. And so that was really, really wonderful, because that made me feel I was prepared, and I appreciated that with boot camp. And you sometimes wonder, okay, is this going to be enough time to kind of have this crash course? But it totally was.
So Meredith, let me ask you, how did you like the breakout sessions with the board members for training?
Well, that's a good question. You scared, no, you were wonderful. It was wonderful to be able to have all these different stakeholders, because you have to be prepared for people who are not necessarily on your side. And that was good, because I know Dave was also, I think Dave, you were the one that was anti court reporter, I believe. And so we needed to be friendly. We didn't want to come across as we're going to back you up in a corner and try to convince you or be a bully. So that was good. I mean, it was nice to be able to speak with somebody who was very friendly and exciting. I think it was Kathy Peniston, who was like the court reporter advocate. So it was very comfortable to be able to kind of talk about the Real Time Writers Act in front of her, because she was like, "Oh, absolutely, you are wonderful." And then Dave is like, I'm not sure about that. I haven't heard about that." And so we were like, "Okay, I'll give you another scenario of why we really need more stenographers." So that really helped us kind of brainstorm and come up with scenarios. But that also brought up so many personal scenarios that we've actually experienced in person. So we had somebody in our group who actually had this scenario where she was doing a jury trial. There's a juror who was deaf or hard of hearing. There's nobody that was able to provide captioning services, and they weren't able to be a juror. And that was just heartbreaking. And that was a scenario that we did bring up to legislators when we were on the Hill. And that was really important. And when there's something that's personal that you've lived yourself, it just so easily is persuasive. It just comes off your chest so smoothly. And it worked really well. And then people are bouncing off ideas in your group. And it worked in the mock, and it worked in real life on the Hill. So it went so smoothly. It was amazing how everyone was able to connect their stories from one another.
Mhm.
It's interesting too, Meredith. Some people are like, well, this is a Republican office or Democratic office. I'm this or that. When you go up to Capitol Hill or in your state legislature, you're not there on behalf of your own political philosophies. You're there as a neutral party trying to advocate for whether it's the Wisconsin court reporters, the New York State court reporters, or Texas TCRA or NCRA. You are there as a neutral person trying to get the best benefit for everybody. And it's tough for people to set aside their own politics to meet with other people that they may not agree with, but that's part of the process. That's part of what makes it important, because we're having a dialogue with people who, quite frankly, may or may not know anything about court reporters or captioners, right?
Absolutely. And I let me tell you that having politics kind of thrown out the window was a huge relief, because it's not like you needed to go in some sort of political rampage. It's really, you're there for one sole purpose, and it's to talk about the Training for Real-Time Writers Act. And that was a huge relief.
And it's important because what we do is not only about for us and our profession, but we provide a service to the public. So it's not really a controversial issue. It's for the benefit of everyone. And so when we're coming in there, it's not like we're asking them to go out on a limb on something that is very controversial in the world. It's like, we want people to have equal access to captioning, or we want them to all to have right for the best record. So it's just it's an important thing that we provide an important service to the public. So that's great. I do want to jump in, and she was very nice to talk about Kathy Pensington and say she was so nice and Dave was this. I think I've been labeled the devil with the blue dress on. So I will not be wearing any blue, and it's the personal president's request that I am not the mean girl this
We're
year.
so
Although
traumatized.
it goes in one ear and out the other, I think. So
You
we'll
did a good job.
yeah, well, I think maybe Kathy should have it this year. I don't know. So anyhow, before we turn it over to Joshua for a little bit, and then if you have anything else to add, Meredith, we'll come back to you. And I have to share with you, as you know, I'm president of NCRA, and I've been around for a long time now. But one of the first things I got to do is I started my leadership in Kansas. I lived there for 10 years before. I've been in Texas now, 11. And so I got sent to a legislative boot camp, and it was really huge and stuff back then. It was very scary. And Doug Friend was president. I had to go out with him. And I remember getting asked about, we were doing something advocating for benefits for all court reporters. And she's like, what do you care about this? I think it was. And what benefit? I think I'm mixing up my stories, but anyhow, I just looked, but this is my point of telling you this is leadership will go with you if you're a little scared. I mean, we go out with some of the groups, and I remember looking over at Doug Friend, like deers in the headlight, and he just took right over. So it's good. We go as teams. So we each work on, as Meredith was talking about, you have your strengths on your team set when you go and do the mock trials with the board members. Everybody finds their lead person, they add the personal story. So those are all important elements. And so later when I had to drop off a folder to somebody who wasn't present, and I had a little staffer say, well, I see you're an official reporter. What do you care about this? And I said, but I represent an association, Kansas at that time, that does have the interests of freelance reporters in mind. So I was ready, but sometimes it can be a little scary at first. And speaking on the panel was very beneficial. Several years ago, Kansas decided to restructure all their statutes, and they took out our certification for the CSR, and we had to get it back. And so I think it was president at that time, or past president, one of those things. They asked me to go speak up on the Hill, if you want to call it that, in Kansas. But I went up there, and it really was so less intimidating on that level. It was, you had your speaking parts about how certification is important. We certify hairdressers and all different other kinds of electricians, doctors, and it's always important to have certification. So it was easy, and we got it back in. Thankfully, it wasn't too hard, but I had to go up there and do it. So you had to go testify in front of the legislator. And so that when Dave mentions the panel, that's really important. So I think I've given enough of my little tidbits, but looking forward to boot camp. It's always a refresher course. If you haven't been, is always good too. It's good to be back in that element and with your colleagues, because you build off of each other's energy, I think. So it's very advantageous. Now, Joshua is here, and he could talk about NCRA and how the impact of boot camp has been on that. Joshua?
Yes, thanks, Kristen, and hi, Dave, Meredith. Great to be on with you, and hello to everyone who's watching, and especially to our NCRA reps and delegates. This has been such a great experience of leadership development for me personally, being involved with NCRA and with Yvette Heinze as the co-chair, and last year, Carol Naughton, who's now on the board, was the chair. And so I'm attending boot camp this year specifically because I'm now the chair of NCRA. But also there's another very important reason, and that is that I love the topic of AI. It is so prevalent, and it's so important for us to discuss. NCRA had the great white paper that they put out, the Strong Committee. But what we're going to do at boot camp is going to be discussing the uncomfortable topics and learning how we respond to uncomfortable questions. And this will be my second year attending boot camp. So I want to talk about what we talked about my first year, which was about 6 or 7 years ago that I went. And the topic of discussion was electronic recording. And so when we discussed that topic, we had a keynote speaker who was an attorney, and his presentation was completely vulnerable and honest, and it forced us to confront uncomfortable realities about the use of technology, the prevalence of technology, and he constructed the presentation in a way that made you think, oh no, there's no hope, we're going to be replaced. But we need to be able to sit with that discomfort before we can finally get to a solution, because ultimately his thesis was, we're not going to be replaced, but the threat is there and we need to know how to address it. And that's the same thing with artificial intelligence, and it's the same thing with all the other challenges that are facing our field. Boot camp is a place to discuss those, and not just kind of in a casual Zoom format. It's like a chance to be together with people, and it's much more interactive. I'd like to contrast boot camp with an NCRA annual conference, which is, of course, a lot of fun and great networking, but we basically sit and attend seminars and listen to the content from the presenter, watch the PowerPoints, maybe take notes, and then get a CEU credit. Boot camp is different. Boot camp is interactive, and leadership, the big difference between, or actually being a leader, is that it's about taking action. So by just attending, you're already taking that first step towards showing leadership, towards embracing that, toward being willing to be uncomfortable, especially with the mock testifying that they set up, and you have somebody who's pro and kind of patting you on the back, but you also need that resistance of somebody who's anti and saying, well, why can't I can turn on my phone, I can hit record and the words come out. Why do I need to pay the court reporter all this money? Why can't we save the money in the court system, and so forth? And again, leaders need to be able to hear those objections, hear those points, and respond to them. That's what boot camp is going to help us take away. And so when we were talking about electronic recording, and then when we finally went and met with the legislators on Capitol Hill, we were prepared to discuss those points. And I want to talk specifically about the experience of meeting with lawmakers. We walked around the whole campus of the Capitol. We met, I forget how many, maybe half a dozen interviews, and most of them were with staffers, not with the actual lawmakers themselves. But the ultimate thing, number one, like Dave and Meredith were saying, the politics are out the window. It doesn't matter because there's the court system, and that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for the accurate transcript that stenographic court reporters make, and that does not depend on if you are in the red or the blue. So it's easy to put that aside. But what I saw is as we went throughout the day, you know, everybody was very nervous at the beginning. You walked into the lawmaker's office, you're like, this is the big moment, oh my gosh. And we were kind of bumbling through our way about what to talk about. It's like it's like dating. By the time you get to the third or fourth date, you're past all of the initial interview stuff and you just learn how to get to the point. So when my group finally made it to our final interview of the day, we went to Senator Chuck Schumer's office, and we didn't meet with him, we met with a staffer. And so it was very easy for us to say, okay, here's the deal. We are here, we're court reporters, we're stenographers, the court system is trying to replace us with electronic recording. Here's why that's bad. Here's why we preserve the integrity of the record. And here's a real-time writer's grant, and we're asking for you to vote in support of the reauthorization, and the budget was, I think, $1 million. Got right to the point, and the young lady, the staffer said, well, okay, great. Yeah, you know, that dollar amount is not really in the grand scheme of things all that much, so that should be a pretty easy win. And boom, all of a sudden it was like it was the easiest experience in the world. And that, again, it doesn't mean that everyone's going to agree with our reasoning or be pro stenographer, but it demystified the process of us making that pitch and explaining and being able to get right to the point, because they are so inundated with people coming to them for their own particular desires and needs and things that they want the lawmakers to vote on, that their time is precious, and we as court reporters need to be able to get right to the point. That comes with practice, that comes with attending boot camp, that gives you that environment where you learn how to do that. And yes, some people are better at presenting or speaking than others. Some people prefer to be wallflowers, but we need to be able to get over that. And we can all, as leaders, as state leaders, and in particular as NCRA leaders, we need to be able to step out of that comfort zone and do the job that we need to do to promote this field. And I just want to share one tip also, and I'll end on this. There was a lot of walking, and a good friend of mine, one of the New York delegates, wore high heels and was in tears, literally in tears by the end of the day. I wanted to pick her up and carry her. So please bring comfortable shoes that you can just quickly, you know, change into, and carry the high heels if you're going to wear them, and then, you know, save your feet. So I hope I can spare some people that agony.
Yeah,
So
you know, Joshua, that's brilliant, because it's true. You'll get your steps in for sure. No doubt about that. But let me just tag on to a couple things that Joshua said, which is critical. It is an immersive program. It's going to be interactive. And we give you the hard-hitting questions that you're going to face. And this is the thing that I think most people, you know, sometimes when you're talking to friends, it's kind of an echo chamber. You're getting the same feedback that you want to hear. Boot camp puts you in that situation where somebody's going to ask you an uncomfortable question. And if you don't have the answer, you might get defensive. The problem is that leads to a bad meeting and a bad taste in somebody's mouth about who you are and who you represent. But by having all the hard-hitting questions ahead of time and somebody asking you, you know how to redirect that. It becomes a very good talent. And if you listen to Joshua, it's fascinating, because Joshua, you did it in 2018, I think, 6 years ago. He still remembers the term reauthorization, and that was drilled into him at the time. And he's a brilliant man anyway, but the kicker is that this is what happens. We give you the information, we drill it into you, you go through these scenarios, you testify about it, and then you go up to Capitol Hill. And like you said, the first couple are clunky, but then all of a sudden you get in your rhythm, and you're like, Meredith's going to take this part, Kristen's going to take this part, I'm going to take this part, and you tag team it, and it becomes a well-oiled machine. And it is such the energy that you get back, and we do a debrief after it, and everybody's telling their stories, and I got this guy to co-sponsor this, and everybody's high-fiving. And when you leave boot camp, you feel drained because it is a long 3 days, but it's a great 3 days. But you feel like you've accomplished something. You've done something that most Americans never do.
Mhm.
And that is what makes this country great. We can go and use the First Amendment and petition our government for the changes that we want and we need for this profession. And you can do it. I love it when somebody goes, oh, somebody else is going to take care of that. Well, congratulations. Today you're somebody. So everybody needs to be their own lobbyist because, like I said, we need to make sure the government's doing something for us every day. Sorry, I didn't mean to go long-winded, but Joshua, that was exactly on point. And Meredith, this is the point of why boot camp's great, is because we take people who get out of their own skill set and do something for the betterment of the entire organization and profession. It's brilliant.
And I'll kind of take off on that as well. And kind of like what Josh was saying about speed dating, you know, you don't want to get like over emotional on your little speed dating, or you don't want to lie. And so I feel like boot camp kind of prevents all of that. So for instance, you don't want to go in front of like a senator or a staffer and be like, AI is horrible, or you don't want to have all this anger and emotion. You want to be just prepared. You want to have facts. You want to be personable, professional, respectful. And I feel like this kind of prepares you to have, that again, that little bit of an elevator pitch and all the facts. And then also, if you don't have an answer, if they ask you a question, you're like, oh, I'm not sure. We could say, you know what, we'll get back to you, because you have their contact information. And that helps, because you don't want to be like, well, you know what, there's about 8 million people out there that have this and that. And you don't want to lie. That's just not good. So yeah, I really appreciated that. So right off of the speed dating comment kind of connects with that.
That's great. Well, I know there's going to be a component of the elevator speeches this year. We're going to work on those at boot camp, and great points. Also, Joshua, talking about NCRA and having each of our affiliate associations send somebody here, because it's so important to get those tools and take them back to the states, because that way you can get great things accomplished. Then you're building your leaders up year after year, giving them the tools they need to take over and carry the torch and keep working on behalf of our membership and the profession. So that's all great. Well, unless anybody else has any closing words.
I have a couple things.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Dave.
I'll try to keep it short.
I figured we're good on time this time, so go ahead.
Awesome. So what's interesting is, Meredith was saying you don't want to go off on people. You don't want to do something. There was a member from New York who's a very good advocate who came to boot camp. And during the hearings, we were pushing his buttons, and he eventually got to a point where he lost it. And afterward, he was like steaming mad. Then afterward, and he goes, "Why'd you do that?" And I said, "So you wouldn't do that there." And he's like, "Oh my God." He goes, "I was so defensive and whatever." I said, "That you can't do that. You could have the best messaging in the world, but if people lose faith in you as a good speaker for the profession, you could be giving away world peace, but nobody wants it because you're selling it and you're not a good, you get all bent out of shape." You have to take that personal, somebody goes, "Oh, well, why don't you just use your iPhone? Why don't you just record it?" You don't want to lose it and go, "You're an idiot." That's all bad.
Yes.
But it's fascinating, because once you get that spiel down and once you understand how to speak to these folks, it really changes things. And I don't know if Meredith or Joshua, I know Chris, you've probably seen this, but sometimes the legislator will be going to a vote and you're supposed to meet with the legislator, and they're all of a sudden say, "Hey, can you walk with me and talk with me about the issue?" And you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to be in a chair, I'm going to be sitting across from the staff or this member, and all of a sudden they start walking there and they expect you to give the pitch on the walk. So you have to be very flexible. And it's cool because you get in an elevator and it's like, well, why is this important in the court reporting profession? Well, here's why. And you've got 20 people around you and you're pitching them right then and there. So it is kind of it makes you fast on your feet and very flexible. Joshua, did you have something else on that?
Yeah, that reminds me of oral argument before the Supreme Court. where you better know the merits of the other side. You can't just brush them under the rug because they're going to drill you about it. And if you want to win your case as an attorney, I actually read a book by Antonin Scalia about arguing your case before the Supreme Court. And he said, if I get a brief and the opponent doesn't address the adversary's, the strengths and weaknesses of their argument, it's a bad sign because it looks like you're hiding something, and we're going to find out about it because they're going to tell us why they should win anyway. We have to do the same thing. We need to understand both sides, not get defensive. And that's a great story about how you pressed and pressed that guy so that he broke under pressure in the mock scenario, so that in the real world, it's like you tear down the muscle in the gym, but in the real world, you go out and you've gotten stronger, and now you're not going to collapse under pressure. That was all.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Well, this episode will be airing in February, so we will be finalizing our preparations for boot camp this year in March. So we look forward to seeing everybody that is going to be able to attend. But if you don't, we encourage you to go to the NCRA website and check out under events, legislative boot camp, and the agenda and everything that we did, because you don't want to miss the next one that comes up. So it's very important to be advocating for promoting our profession and protecting our profession. And everything we talked about today, as everybody maybe gets tired of me saying, is every connection matters, and connections matter on the Hill, and they matter with our colleagues that we meet there, because a lot of the states are going through the same struggles, whether it's licensure getting removed or their approval board. So we're a tiny army, but when we all work together, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There, a lot of resources are there, and something Meredith's been through, we could use that in Texas and New York, and all the way to California, where we all have similar issues sometimes that we're dealing with. So we can use our tools to work together. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you all next time. Have a great day.